Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first talk of Kilmitain. It is really lovely to see some familiar faces here tonight, and so many friendly faces as well. I'm Maryam Alwazzan, and I'm going to be moderating this session, Building a Creative City. Today, we will explore how a city can become a thriving hub for creativity by examining the role of government in fostering innovation, the importance of public spaces and urban intervention, and lastly, the concept of temporary urbanism in Kuwait. And of course, we will conclude the session with Q&A to further engage the discussion. Now that we got all of that out of the way, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker, Ms. Sharifa Alshalfan, a member of Kuwait Municipal Council, urban architect, an educator who taught at the architecture department at Kuwait University, with a work and research interest reflecting her deep commitment to advancing urban policy and land use governance, particularly in the GCC and mainly in Kuwait. Welcome, Sharifa, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Maryam.
But before we start diving deeper into our discussion today, let's start with more of a simple, yet perhaps an essential and fundamental question. What is a public space?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm very excited to be here with you. Thank you, Kilmitain team, for all your efforts, and Khaleejesque for putting this together. And thank you, Maryam. So to answer your question, and this is a very important question, public space normally in other countries is very well defined and known. Anything outside your property line is considered public space. So your pavement, your street, parks, alleyways, squares, all of this is public space. In Kuwait, this is also defined and very clearly defined in terms of planning. However, our perception of public space is not very clear. So for example, we look at the setback as an extension of our property. For any architects here with us, we know that the setback is actually the space between your plot line or your fence and your building. However, in Kuwait, it goes beyond that. We call it al-irtidad, which is anything in front of your house. And we normally see people either planting that area or parking their cars. This extension of privatizing public space even goes beyond the setback. People are uncomfortable with the concept of having a foreign car parking in front of their house. So in order to understand why this is happening is because public space is normally the space where people gather. In Kuwait, the most important occupier of public space is the car rather than people. And this is why, unfortunately, we start seeing the other spaces like the parks and the alleyways and the squares really neglected.
So going to the role of the government in creativity and innovation, many people might not really perceive government bodies such as the Municipal Council as perhaps a champion of creativity. So from your perspective, what role should the government play in supporting creative and innovative urban spaces here in Kuwait?
Absolutely. I think creativity doesn't go along with governments very much, and not only in Kuwait, but really in so many other countries. Governments are known to be bureaucratic, they're known to be slow, normally lacking in innovation. But that is not to say that governments do not play a role. And specifically, the Municipal Council, and I would like to explain a little bit about the Municipal Council for those of you who are not very familiar. So the Municipal Council is the legislative body of the municipality, which means that at the council we approve regulations, and then the municipality is responsible to execute them. So for example, we have the most well-known regulation is the building code. So after it gets approved by the council, the municipality is responsible for issuing permits and whatnot. So there is a responsibility at the council to regulate public space and the uses of public space. However, it should be noted that we need to always think about the balance between the common good and the private interest.
So can a balance actually between the regulation and creativity be achieved? And how can we do that?
I think it can. I think there are different, perhaps, examples I can think about from previous councils. And this balance I'm talking about really stems from not only saying what is allowed and not allowed, because a lot of the times the law actually allows for certain activities to take place, but there isn't a regulation that explains how these things can be permitted. So I'm sure a lot of you have faced this, where you want to do something that makes a lot of sense and probably has a very positive value to the community, but you go to وزارة الصناعة or وزارة التجارة and they'll say, no, you can't do that. Go to the municipality. And then the municipality says, no, go to this other place. And you end up in a circle going round and round because nobody really knows how to permit these kinds of activities. And this is why I just said that governments really are lacking, in innovation. So there are gaps in these regulations, and I think it is our role to fill these gaps. And just one brief example, a lot of you probably know Quwait market. Yes? Okay, so for those of you who don't, Quwait market is a temporary seasonal market that was created a few years ago. So when they first wanted to have Quwait market, they faced a lot of issues because it was a new idea, and there was no way to permit this. And they really struggled, God bless them. At one point, they even were going to, shut them down. So the previous council decided that, it's time for them to step in and create a regulation that allows for that. So today we have something called لائحة المعارض المؤقتة, and anybody wanting to do something similar to Quwait market can very easily go to the municipality and license it.
Wonderful. So public spaces are seen as essential for a thriving, creative city. What small, practical interventions do you believe could make a public space in Kuwait more inviting and engaging for our community?
100%. I think our public spaces definitely need intervention, whether it's intervention at the government level or at the community level. And I think today there's a concept of participatory urban planning where the community is actually participating in making spaces or creating spaces or improving spaces that serve their communities. And I just want to share a few examples from what I'm talking about. I hope this works. Yes. Okay. So this is an image from a square in Detroit. So during the summer, this square transforms into a beach, obviously without any water, but so they bring in sand and some beach chairs and some umbrellas, and they, enjoy themselves on the beach, and children play, and once the summer is over, this gets removed. And the following summer, you'll find something similar, but like with different colored chairs and different activities. Another example is this little square where they brought in a few boxes, a few tubes, and created a space for children to play, which is something also temporary. This is more of a more formal architectural intervention. So this platform was pre-built and brought into the space. It created some seating areas. It created, it has a few plants. And as you can see, people use it as a viewing platform for, this band that's playing here. Okay, so this is obviously Times Square in New York. And the image on the left is Times Square probably 10 or 15 years ago, which was filled with cars and taxis. The image on the right is the transformation of Times Square into a pedestrian plaza. But the reason I'm showing you this is because I want to share this image of the transformation that happened before the permanent transformation took place that I just showed. So at one point, they wanted to experiment with what happens if we close off part of Times Square and give it back to the public and the people. So they brought in an artist, and her name is Molly Dilworth. She painted the street in this blue color, brought in some tables and umbrellas and chairs, and people were they flocked into the space, as you can see, and they were just like enjoying it. And after the success of this, then they transformed the space into a more permanent intervention. Okay, so this is Kuwait. Some of you also might know this. I apologize for the quality of the image. I couldn't find anything better online. But this is the secret garden. It's not too far from where we are here. And this also happened a few years ago where the community decided that there was a neglected park next door, and they wanted to bring life back into it. So they started planting, they brought in some tires for seating, some benches, and the park really thrived. They had activities for children, they had a mini market, they were cooking. But it just happened haphazardly, and unfortunately, because it wasn't licensed, it was removed. This is another example from Yarmouk Park. Again, this is another park that the community decided they wanted to experiment with improving it, but here it was more about recycling. And finally, probably also all of you know this is the Sedu Street, and they brought in an artist to improve the street in front of the Sedu house. So I just wanted to share these different examples to show the potential of what can happen in public space here in Kuwait. I showed the international examples, but then I wanted to share with you the local examples, and this is what got me and my colleague at the council, Abdulatif Fidei, to think about, well, how can we provide a regulation to allow for these sort of activities to happen in different communities, and for them not to be, banned or removed, and so this is really it, yes.
I just love the examples that you've showed us, because it's like a little bit of mixture between some perhaps temporarily urbanism interventions and some of them more so permanent. Can you elaborate more on the differences and how we can approach each case?
Absolutely. So there's a concept called tactical urbanism, and which means temporary urbanism, or I like to call it pop-up urbanism. So this is where there's interventions in public space, but don't require any permanent construction. And this is where the community is really involved, because they identify different needs and they come together. And mostly it's the creative community who does that. The the permanent interventions are more, they're more government-led or institutionally led, because obviously they need more budget, they require budgets, maintenance. In Kuwait, the difference between temporary and permanent is when it's a temporary intervention, I think it's much easier in terms of the permitting, because as a lot of you know, there's a lot of, for example, the street in Kuwait, if you want to change the pavement, you have to go to the Ministry of Public Works. If you want to plant it, you would have to go to Zira'a, and so on and so forth. So temporary interventions are much easier, plus they are under the jurisdiction of the municipality. So this is where we have room to kind of work.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for clarifying these differences between these two approaches. So we all know that Kuwait has a unique approach to their urban planning, and it's still undergoing a lot of development, a lot of study and research. With that in mind, how does this evolving approach here in Kuwait impact the potential for creating a vibrant public spaces, particularly through concepts like the temporary urbanism that you've just mentioned?
Right. So I think I'm particularly interested in the concept of tactical urbanism or temporary urbanism. And this is why, with my colleague Abdulatif Fadei, we thought to put together a regulation that today I want to share with you. This is the first time we share it in public. It's still a draft. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share it, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. And at the end, this is for you. This is for the community, for the creative community. And I would really like to hear your thoughts on, are we on the right track? Is this something that you actually would like to be involved in? So if you don't mind, I'd just like to show all right. And I would like to switch to Arabic right now because the regulation is in Arabic. And for those of you who don't speak Arabic, I'm very happy to answer your questions or chat afterwards about it. So I'm going to stand so I can read what's going. فإحنا قاعد نشتغل على لائحة اسمها لائحة تجميل المساحات العامة. فإحنا استعملنا كلمة تجميل لأن إحنا لازم نكون creative في طريقة أيضاً كتابة اللائحة. كلمة تجميل موجودة في قانون البلدية، وعشان كذي إحنا لازم ناخذ كل اختصاصاتنا من القانون. فقسمناها إلى قسمين، طبعاً هذا مختصر، هي لائحة طبعاً أطول وفيها تفاصيل أكثر، ولكن قسمناها إلى قسمين. القسم الأول، إذا إحنا نبي نشتغل بهذه الطريقة وين نقدر نشتغل؟ فالأماكن اللي مسموحة فيها، وهذه أيضاً جاية من القانون، هي المدن في القرى، بس أنا ما حطيت القرى بعد لأن ما عندنا قرى، فيها المناطق، الجزر، الطرق، الشوارع، الميادين والأرصفة. فهذه الأماكن اللي إحنا كبلدية ممكن أن نرخصها. طيب بهالمناطق عرفنا الأماكن، الحين شنو نقدر نسوي؟ فهذه العناصر اللي مسموح بها، فنقدر نحط كراسي أو مظلات متحركة، ألعاب أطفال، مجسمات، معدات رياضية، عصاي الزرع يعني pots of planting، وإضاءات. وكل هالعناصر هي أثاث حضري متحرك، وهذا جدا مهم أنه هو شيء متحرك وليس ثابت. نوع الترخيص هو ترخيص مؤقت، ويسمح بعمل ترميمات عامة وصبغ الأماكن وزراعتها بشكل دائم بعد الحصول على موافقات الجهات المختصة. هذا السؤال مريم اللي أنت كنتي قاعد تقولي عنه، شو الفرق بين المؤقت والدائم؟ إذا حولنا إلى دائم، معناته إذا إحنا بالرصيف لازم ناخذ، إذا بنسبق مثلا لازم نروح الأشغال ناخذ منهم لا مانع، بس إذا إحنا بالمؤقت ما نحتاج. وآخر شيء وأعتقد هذا شيء جدا جدا مهم، إنه يلتزم المرخص له بإتاحة المكان مفتوح للجميع ولا يسمح له بإغلاقه أو حصر استخدامه، وهذا عشان يظل المكان مكان عام وما يتحول إلى مكان خاص، لأن إحنا نبي ننعش الأماكن العامة. شكرا.
Thank you so much. I have one final question before we move into the Q&A. الترم تجميل المساحات العامة، هل كان هذا الترم استخدامه في البنود played more as an advantage or a disadvantage?
To be honest, the term, as I said, we took directly from the law. So in terms of the regulation, it's an advantage because it's in the law, and then we can say, there it is, we can do it. The term tajmeel or beautification for me is a very, a term that cannot be defined, right? What's beautiful for me might be not beautiful for you, and vice versa. But I think it shouldn't be a problem because, again, it is part of the law, and we need to be creative in how we write these regulations.
Awesome, thank you so much. And now we can move into the Q&A. Not quite sure if there's going to be a mic circulating around.
Thank you أولاً الأخت شريفة بالعكس, this is a great law, but I guess what I'm wondering is this a law that once it's passed that anybody can apply to beautify a public space, or is this something where al-Baladiyya or the municipal council would champion and offer up certain public spaces that are identified and say, hey guys, come, apply, do your thing? And what is the criteria that makes it temporary versus permanent? Because paint to me sounds permanent. And I go back to, I remember there's Jidariyat one time did this beautiful wall art that was taken down. And so where is the, what's the criteria here?
Okay, so the criteria in terms of where, it's basically anything that is shara, rasif, the table, the column on the left. So if you apply, you identify an area and you apply for it, and you apply at the municipality and should be get permitted. The municipality will not be involved in selecting these areas. Right. However, there are, again, I did not put everything down. There are restrictions. So for example, we spoke about public space and its definition in Kuwait, and I think we need to respect that as well. So for example, if it's in front of a house, I don't think it's appropriate that that should be allowed. So that's not allowed. If it's maybe in front of a shop or so there is these criteria, but again, we are open. This is still a draft. If you have any suggestions, we're happy to hear them. Your second question was about paint. Paint is permanent. So this is where the part where it was for anything else that's permanent, you need to get approval from other entities. So if you're painting the ground, then you would get the approval from Al-Ashghal. In terms of buildings, this becomes private property, and also it relates to لائحة الإعلانات So this becomes another thing which we're not dealing with here. We're not dealing with buildings, we're just dealing with the public space.
Thank you, thank you.
Sure.
Second question.
Hello, so I have a question about public spaces. So I have a question regarding disability accommodations. So are there any directives to ensure that public spaces are as inclusive as possible? For an example, for wheelchair access or elderly people, etc.
Thank you for your question. It's a very important question, and I'm a big believer that public spaces should be open for all. And this is why, if you notice, the last line in the regulation that I showed was that it must be open to all. You cannot fence it off, you cannot have guards, you cannot allow, you cannot select who goes in and goes out. But yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
We have someone who raised their hand in the middle as well, right? I believe you saw someone. Oh, they're here, okay.
Hi, hello, hi. Thank you very much for your talk. Hello? Okay, sorry. That you mentioned a lot of the public spaces have been taken over with parking. And I wonder if there could be some type of creative solution to deal with all the parking problems in Kuwait, because I know it's, definitely the spaces are taken up with cars, but perhaps there could be an initiative to actually do something with the parking, because it does, it is definitely impacting those public spaces.
I completely agree. Today, the issue with parking relates to many things. It relates to planning of the country itself. Today, our planning forces us to use cars. I want to give an example from my experience, from myself, and how our behavior changes depending on the way the city is planned. So I lived once in a city in the US where it was very similar to Kuwait in terms of streets and highways, and I could not move from point A to point B without having a car, and there wasn't Uber back then, so it was really challenging. I also lived in Europe where it was completely the opposite. Public transport was very well connected, whether it's the buses or the trams or underground, and I never even thought of renting a car once. So there's different, so planning is one. The other thing is parking is very cheap here, so fuel is very cheap. So there has to be like an overall policy if we were to change that. And I think also public transport is very, very weak. So, but I believe that today we're all suffering, especially the past 2-3 days from the traffic. And I imagine it will only get worse very soon with all the road construction and all the improvements to the roads. And I think it's an opportunity today for us as a society and as the government to take public transport seriously and to start planning today for public transport to be a means of transportation while these road improvements are taking place.
Okay, we can take one final question.
I think it's a fantastic idea. Beautification of Kuwait, anything positive for the country is fantastic. Thank you. My concern would be who's going to clean, who's responsible for cleaning it, who's responsible for maintaining it, who's responsible for removing it, and making sure that the safety features are adhered to, so we don't have any accidents or, it needs to be safe for, like the woman said, for maybe elderly or for children. So all of these need to be taken into accountability, so we don't have a fantastic project that somebody did, but then it rained and it got ruined and then nobody took care of it and it's just left a mess. So would that be part of the contractual agreement that you have, and when somebody comes to apply for such projects?
Yes, absolutely. So as I mentioned, I didn't show everything that's in the regulation because I'm sure a lot of it is going to be boring and not very interesting to everyone here. But this is very important, and this is exactly why we want it to be temporary. Because if it's permanent, then we know that maintenance is an issue. And there's going to be insurance. So if you use that space, you have to pay insurance. And once you remove it, then you get your insurance back. But again, we want to hear your ideas, and if you think there are any particular things that we need to include, please feel free to share them now or later. And I just have one question for the audience and for you, the creative community. Is this something that you would be interested in participating in if it was a regulation? You want to say something, or the? Yeah, so maybe a show of hands, like is this something that, okay, wonderful, thank you.
Amazing. Thank you all for your participation and for your insightful questions. I hope we were able to shed some light on some of the really essential elements that might help us create a creative city. And special thanks to Ms. Sharifa Alshalfan for her valuable insights. And thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the talks. Thank you.
Thank you.